Waiting is hard. It's difficult to be patient when we really want something. But as we will see in a few minutes, doing something we want at the wrong time can bring big consequences. In today's story, we're going to learn why obedience is so important to God. How do you know what God wants you to do? Well, the Bible tells us what God wants us to do. Through it, we hear directly from God about what He says is important and how we should live our lives. When we do not follow His word, that is called sin, which leads us to our big picture question. Why does sin separate us from God? Because God is holy, sin has broken our relationship with God. Sin is when we disobey God. Sometimes we sin because we do what God told us not to do. Other times we do not do what God told us to do. You will hear examples of these types of disobedience in today's Bible story. The Israelites asked for a human king to lead them, so God chose Saul to be king. With God's help, Saul brought all the Israelites together to fight their enemies. But Saul was not a great king, and we will see why in today's story. King Saul gathered an army and took some of the men into the hill country. Israel's enemies, the Philistines, came out to fight. The Israelites were outnumbered. They were all afraid. Some of them hid. Saul wanted to ask God for help. Maybe if he made an offering to God, they would win the battle. There was one problem. Only the priests, like Samuel, were allowed to give offerings to God. Saul waited, but Samuel didn't come. Saul's soldiers started to leave, so Saul decided to make an offering to God himself. Then Samuel showed up. "You have disobeyed God," Samuel said. "You will not be king much longer. God is going to find someone obedient to be king." Sometime later, Samuel came to Saul with a message from God. God wanted Saul to attack the Amalekites. God wanted Saul to destroy everything. But after Saul defeated the Amalekites, he only destroyed things that were not valuable. Samuel confronted Saul again. "Well, I did obey God," Saul argued. "I only saved the best animals to sacrifice to the Lord." Samuel asked, "Does God care more about obedience or sacrifices? You rejected his instructions, so God has rejected you as king." When the Philistines came to fight the Israelites were afraid. They forgot how God had protected them in previous battles and that he would do it again. Instead of waiting on God, Saul decided to take matters into his own hands and did something only priests were allowed to do: make a sacrifice to God. Later, when God asked Saul to completely destroy the Amalekites, Saul kept the best of their animals and flocks. He partially obeyed God, but that was still disobedience. Then when Samuel confronted him about his sin, he tried to deny it, lie about it, and cover it up. Saul was drifting from God and caught in a cycle of sin. We all find ourselves in these moments, trapped in sin. But we can remember that God made a way for us to not have to pay sin's consequences. He sent Jesus to die on the cross and rise again so that we could be forgiven of our sin and live with him forever. Jesus was the perfect sacrifice that fixed our broken relationship with God. God gave the Israelites a king, but Saul did not obey God. God had a plan to send his son Jesus. King Jesus trusted and obeyed God perfectly and died so sinners could be forgiven and accepted. Let's take another look at our memory verse, Isaiah 6:5. It says, "Then I said, woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips, and live among a people of unclean lips, and because my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of armies." Isaiah said, "I am a man of unclean lips," because he knew that he had sinned and disobeyed God, just like us. Only Jesus' perfect sacrifice can fix the relationship with God that sin broke.